if you can't freely speak, if you're afraid to even express your viewpoint and you're silenced before you can even say anything, then it fundamentally breaks that whole idea of living in a democratic society. Will your children and your children's children have the same rights protected by the First Amendment that you have, that my parents had, that my grandparents had? Will they be able to speak freely without the threat of being reported and turned into the woke authorities who will then try to bring charges against them? Well, that's what's happening in Scotland. It's happening in Ireland. It's happening across the globe. We saw in Brazil with Elon Musk and his battle there. In Pakistan, I was on the phone with friends of mine who are unable to go on X, and it is not allowed in their country. And it's devastating to them because they feel that they can't be a part of this global marketplace of ideas, that they can't share their thoughts. And imagine what is happening across the globe and what's happening here in the United States, where we can't even feel like we can express ourselves without being targeted by these radical progressive leftists who are lying to our children. I have to talk about this for a minute. I feel as though we are being force fed these crazy radical ideas because Hollywood's in on it, the movie industry, influencers for the most part on the left, and of course, progressive leftist lawmakers in the Democratic Party. And I'm not saying I turn off TV. If it's something that is offensive to me, I'm not asking to ban it. I just turn it off or I stop paying for it like I did with Disney Channel. There was a show though, however, it was on Netflix. I'm not going to say which show it was. And my daughters were watching it. It was a foreign show from Asia. That's all I'm going to say. And they were watching like the first 3 episodes and it seemed pretty nice, pretty normal, just a kid's show. But then by the 4th episode, the girl who was like in love with this young man all of a sudden started having sex dreams about a girl. I was like, what? I could not believe we're like turning it off. It's like, this is what they're doing with our children, right? They're putting all this weird stuff, like while you're busy, taking care of the household chores or whatever, your kids are being exposed to this, whether this is on their phones or in Netflix or in some kind of app or platform. Okay, I'm not saying we have to eliminate that. I'm not trying to take anything off of television, turn it off, get rid of Netflix, get rid of the Disney Channel, whatever on your television, do whatever you got to do. But in many nations right now, the problem is that there are charging people who say, like, I'm a Christian, I don't believe in this isn't right, that I don't want to believe that this person's actually a woman if he's a man. And you can't make statements of fact like J.K. Rowling did in Scotland. Otherwise, you're going to be reported. And because they've been brainwashing children from so young, right, from the time they're in elementary school, it seems like now, we've had decades of this. Our kids are so confused that facts aren't even facts anymore. It's like, the woke has become its own religion. It has taken over. In Scotland right now, I mean, it's unbelievable. And I guess Ireland is going to be even worse. Up to 7 years in prison, misgendering someone, being charged with that in Mexico right now. We're going to be talking to an expert on this, an attorney who is fighting this on a global scale. Because it is not just an issue that we have to be monitoring here in the United States, but throughout the world. What happens if you go to Ireland or Scotland and you have an X account or X posts, and on those posts you have stated your, beliefs. And you've said, hey, I don't believe this person is actually a woman. I believe they're actually a man. Or this is how I feel about the woke agenda. Or there is no way that my professor, which this is actually true, identified as a hippopotamus, not my professor. It was Jenny Ter's professor in college in Arizona, I think, that identified at one point as a hippopotamus. And I don't believe that, because that person is nuts. Because anybody who identifies as an animal is nuts. I'm sorry. I'm not going to sit there and play into their fantasies. There has to be reality. And reality and facts really don't care, just like Ben Shapiro says, about your feelings. They do. Facts and reality do not care about your feelings. You could feel whatever you want to feel. I don't need to buy into it. But I guess that statement alone can make me a criminal in some places, right? Just saying that. I would love to go hang out in Ireland. My dad's side of the family, they were apparently from the Isle of Skye. And that's where we traced our family lineage back on my dad's side. So to Scotland, but that's ridiculous. Where is freedom? Where is our ability to express ourselves? What is hate speech? What does this mean? It's gone far beyond normal hate speech. This is something that is so upside down that it's fundamentally changing and threatening the First Amendment, freedom of speech. Other countries don't have that. We have that. We're based on principles. We're based on principles. Unfortunately, the threats to this fundamental principle are like on the march. They are on the march. In America, censorious tech giants will shadow ban you if your content isn't safe for advertising. I know this. It could be any kind of content. It could be me reporting to you about what is happening in another country that they happen to have business with. And they just shut me down. That's it. Cowardly bankers will shut down your account if a woke advocacy group, and this has happened. We saw it with Donald Trump Jr. We saw it with Michael Flynn. We've seen it with others like the ADL or the SPLC come after you. I remember one time the SPLC, the Southern Poverty Law Center, tried to come after me because I was reporting on the border. And they said I was racist. No, I'm the firstborn on my mother's side from Cuba. And there's no way I don't even think there's a racist bone in my body, except for maybe the SPLC. I don't like them. This is so crazy. In Europe, we see what a world without the First Amendment looks like. This is what we're talking about. In Scotland, that new law that is being proposed right now. It would outlaw any kind of misgendering. It would have a maximum sentence of 7 years in prison, just as I said, up to 7 years in prison. And this is from the AP. Scottish Minister for Victims and Community Safety, Hobian Brown, and I'm probably pronouncing the name wrong, said the new law would help build safer communities that live free from hatred and prejudice. This is mission creep, folks. And it limits your ability to speak your mind. It erodes a free nation and hollows out the freedoms that our ancestors, my husband, my father, my family on my dad's side, going all the way back to the very beginning of America, that they fought so hard for. And on today's show, I have a lawyer who's been fighting against this legislation. She's going to talk about the big news that just happened today in Scotland, and she will share what we need to do to stop this from happening in America. But first, Goldco. Are you concerned about the endless flood of illegal immigration at the southern border? How about the $1 trillion being added to the national debt every 100 days? It's no wonder thousands of hardworking, patriotic Americans, including myself, are learning how to protect and diversify their retirement savings with precious metals. And I mean that. I really do. That's why I've partnered with the top-rated company, Goldco. Listen to the current offer. Get a free 2024 wealth protection kit and learn how to possibly get $10,000 in bonus silver as a listener of this show while supplies last. Protect your family's financial future and freedom. Get started today at Sara, S-A-R-A, likesgold.com or call 855-823-GOLD. Get your free gold kit from Goldco and learn how to get $10,000 in bonus silver. SaraLikesGold.com or 855-823-4653. That's Sara, S-A-R-A, likesgold.com or call 855-823-GOLD. So happy to have Lois McLatchie here on the Sara Carter Show, all the way from Scotland. You serve as a senior legal communications officer for the Alliance of Defending Freedom in the United Kingdom. And thank you so much for being on the show, Lois.
Yeah, of course. My pleasure.
Yeah, we were just talking before we came on, everyone. So I was saying soon the only place you'll be able to freely speak in Scotland is actually in a prison. That's the irony of all of this. Let's talk a little bit about this, because it's absolutely upside down what's happened in our world. You know, at the top of the show, we talked a little bit about this new law that's taking effect in Scotland. That's the main reason why you're here. There's also some breaking news in Scotland. And it's focused mainly on very similar issues, but actually this is, I think, a victory for you. So I'll let you announce the great victory in Scotland right now. It just happened.
Oh, I don't know if it's a victory, but yeah, I mean, it certainly is an example of how governments can fall when they push woke ideology too much. And it's happened twice for us in Scotland now. Both of our former leader and our current leader have both resigned after a big kind of rupture of woke ideology. Our country has pushed very liberal ideology for a long time, mainly along the lines of the fact that that children can be born in the wrong bodies, that men can become women. And our leaders pushed this so much that it has caused major ruptures in society. And today we had the resignation of Humza Yousaf, born out of various frustrations, but also including this particular one. So it's quite a moment for the Scottish people.
Yeah, I mean, and this is First Minister Humza Yousaf. He resigned. He was one of the proponents of the legislation that we're going to be discussing. Just to give you a little background on him, here is a clip of one of his speeches.
The Lord Justice Clerk, white. Every High Court judge, white. The Lord Advocate, white. The Solicitor General, white. The Chief Constable, white. Every Deputy Chief Constable, white. Every Assistant Chief Constable, white. The head of the Law Society, white. The head of the Faculty of Advocates, white. Every prison governor, white. And not just justice. The Chief Medical Officer, white. The Chief Nursing Officer, white. The Chief Veterinary Officer, white. The Chief Social Work Advisor, white. Almost every trade union in this country headed by people who are white. In the Scottish Government, every Director General is white. Every chair of every public body is white.
He really hates white people. It's like, and he's in Scotland. It's like, I don't understand this kind of vitriol, but we're really seeing it to the point where, and I'll bring this up quickly, and then I want you to explain what happened in Scotland, because I'm watching it happen here in the United States. I interviewed a young girl at one of the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian rallies at Columbia. And she walked up and she was wrapped up in a keffiyeh. She was a white girl, blonde hair, blue eyes, American. And she hated herself. She hated herself as much as Humza Yousaf said the word white with that kind of disdain and hate. She hated herself. What do you think is going on here, Lois? Before we get into the legal aspects of this, there is a cultural issue. There is something happening under the surface that is really frightening and is changing our nation's makeup. And it's really creating this racism and this division that is really, really quite terrifying to me.
Yeah, I think there is a rejection of our kind of inherent identities, our inherent bodies, that is manifesting in many, many different ways. And I do think some of the ideas espoused by governments such as the Scottish government really form a kind of religion in their own right. I mean, we look back to times in the UK, in America, and in different places where there was a very dominant Christian religion. And if you go back in Scottish history to, 16th, 17th century, that was too dominant. There was heresy trials against people who spoke out or who questioned Christian ideologies, and that was wrong. We should never have been condemning anyone who was speaking out with Christianity. I mean, freedom of speech really is for everybody to be able to have those conversations. But now it seems we've kind of flipped the other direction, right? Now we're having this dominant religious ideology of another kind, which is a very unforgiving religion. It's a religion that has its own dogmas and doctrines and mantras and things that must be repeated and things that must not be said. And now we're seeing the situation in Scotland, but also across Europe, where people are facing even legal challenges if they are challenging or speaking out against this dominant orthodoxy, this dominant religion of the day. So it's really interesting to see that switch in our culture. And, one is as toxic as the other. No dominant religion should be imposing or forcing anyone to adhere to their values. And when we have that situation, it's a very dangerous situation for democracy.
I was looking earlier at your column. You wrote this amazing column on Fox News. J.K. Rowling and I could be locked up by Scotland's anti-free speech mob. This is almost a religion in and of itself. This type of woke ideology is not just it's become its own purposeful religion. I mean, you could say, you talk about the past, you talk about Christianity, we talk about, the Judeo-Christian values, as well as now we see a rise in, I would say, in Islamism, even within the Muslim religion, where, now we're seeing a lot of changes in places like Dearborn, Michigan, and others, where we have this kind of rise of extremism, right? Where that is a dominant extremism. Well, wokeism feels like it is just as dominant a religious extremism as anything else. It's almost like they worship this idea, right?
Yeah, it's interesting for us in ADF International. We have lawyers across the globe working on all these kinds of cases. And in Nigeria and Pakistan, we have the most heart-wrenching cases where Christians being placed on death row because of blasphemy laws, because of dominant Islamist ideologies, which have placed them there, and they've spoken out against the religion, and they're paying for that, sometimes with their lives or certainly with life sentences. And we're working to help seek justice for them there. And then we flip across to Europe, where we have legal teams working as well, and it's very different. There's no life sentences for any Christians who profess their beliefs. We're not there yet. That's true. It is different. But some of the foundational reasons for some of the trials that we're seeing is similar to a blasphemy law. There's very little difference in substance to what is happening. For example, in Finland, we have a live case, or we are supporting the defense of a parliamentarian of 20 years and a grandmother who in 2019 simply tweeted a Bible verse and challenged her church as to whether they should really be sponsoring the Pride event in Helsinki. She felt that wasn't really the right thing for a church to be doing with church funds. And so she tweeted a challenge to this. Now, Päivi Räsänen, who sent the tweet, has been on trial basically for the last 5 years. She's headed to the Finnish Supreme Court on charges of hate speech, which are filed in the Finnish criminal court under war crimes and crimes against humanity, if you can believe that. So whilst we have these crazy death row situations in Nigeria and in Pakistan, in Finland, it's not as severe, but the principle is the same. If somebody can't express their faith in a tweet or in a WhatsApp message or on the street with a friend or a member of their family, if you can't express your fundamental religious beliefs, then you can't express anything about yourself at all. If you can't have the freedom to talk about what you think on the inside, then what freedom do we have at all? And I think as we've been monitoring,
and why is their freedom? Why is one person's freedom more important than the other person's freedom? I mean, the argument could be made both ways. It's like, why does the other side, or this woke agenda, or, I mean, why are they more apt to being allowed to say whatever they want to say versus somebody who has religious beliefs that they're not insulting them. They're just saying, this is my belief and this is the reason why I think it's wrong.
Yeah, well, I think actually, in theory, the principles are the same on both sides. So neither of us have a right to not be offended. So if somebody is criticizing Christianity or criticizing something that I believe, I absolutely can. I can feel offended, sure, and I can challenge what they say and say, I don't think that's true, and here's why. And that's a very healthy way to engage in society and have these debates. But what I can't do is have that person put on trial because they've said something that upsets me. Now, that is just not a healthy way to run any society. And I think everybody can see that. That's something that we did in the past. It'd be very unhealthy if we did that today. But what is not always seen so clearly is that a lot of these hate speech laws, and we're seeing this crop up in Canada on your side of the water as well, and in Ireland as bills go forward against hate speech. This is really just the reverse. This is to say that Christians or persons who have certain orthodox views on gender, on sexuality, relationships, on marriage, what have you, that is going to really impact their right to be able to speak about their beliefs, to respond in the way that they see fit to policy shifts and policy changes, and that will restrict their ability to speak out in societal debate, which ultimately makes the experience of society poorer for everybody if we're not able to hear each other's views and beliefs and engage in those conversations.
Well, and it destroys the fundamental basic principles of democracy. If you can't freely speak, if you're afraid to even express your viewpoint and you're silenced before you can even say anything, then it fundamentally breaks that whole idea of living in a democratic society. Let's talk about J.K. Rowling for a minute, because I think this is just so important. And I think your column was so on point. J.K. Rowling was coming from the perspective of science. She's just saying, I want people to be factual. That's the way she sees it. She's looking at it as a scientific issue as well. And I mean, that can put her in prison. We're supposed to. So I don't know, what is the guideline? Talk about the law for a little bit. What is the guideline? I imagine it, therefore I am. So if I am in Scotland and I tell everybody in school, you know what, I really feel like I'm a giraffe, a female giraffe, and that's what I am, and that's the pronoun that you need to use to call me. And they don't, can I charge them with crimes against my belief of myself? I mean, that just sounds insane.
Well, it is a very vague law, but it's a little bit more specific than that. So it makes a crime of stirring up hate against persons on 5 different categories, including disability and age and transgender identity and sexual orientation and intersex.
So if you're a comedian, you're going to jail, basically.
Well, that has been certainly a large group who have objected to the law, because Scotland, you wouldn't know it right now, but Scotland's actually very famous for its comedy. We have a huge festival every summer called the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, where many comedians have started off their career. However, I don't know if that's going to be able to continue if comedians are fearful of being able to speak about controversial issues. Their livelihood kind of depends on it. I mean, if you think of comedians, they really go back to the court jester, right? And back in kind of medieval times, and the court jester was the only person that was allowed to say the truth to the king's face and not get into trouble. They were allowed to point out this unspeakable thing and make light of it and make a joke about whether it was the king's weight or how many wives he had or whatever it was. They were able to kind of speak truth to power and get everyone to giggle, whereas everyone else would have been punished. So the comedian has always been the kind of character in society that's calling out truth, saying the unspeakable, pushing the boundary. And if they're not allowed to do that, then it's not going to be very funny, which is going to be a bit of a problem for her entertainment industry. So comedians are certainly one of the groups of people who have spoken out against this law, alongside, of course, women's rights groups who are very concerned about their ability to raise concerns about gender ideology and that's impact on the safety of women and the safety of children in society.
What about the response from the rest of the Scottish public? How has that been?
Yeah,
are they okay with being censored, or are they like, this is ridiculous, we have to put a stop to this?
Yeah, I think the majority have had concerns that there's been certainly a big backlash in the press. And I will say that when the bill was going through Parliament, if you can believe it, it started off even worse than it now is. So there was a concerted effort, probably of kind of not before seen in my short political lifetime, to amend this bill, coming from groups across society, you know, Christians working with atheists, working with feminists, working with comedians, all these different groups of society sticking together together to say, you know, we disagree with each other, but we have a right to disagree with each other, and we want to have that debate and that argument without the government interfering. So there was a great effort to amend the bill, and improvements were made, if you can believe it. But of course, it is still not good enough. And our big fear is that even if this does not have immediate legal ramifications, you know, J.K. Rowling is not going to prison tomorrow, and the police did not decide to charge her over the tweets that she has made about gender critical theory. But the average person might not want to risk it. They might not want to risk what J.K. Rowling could risk as a millionaire who has a great big following, who could get the world's attention with her tweets. The average person who has to go to work in the morning might not want to risk getting arrested or even having a police investigation against them. And so this is going to really chill those important conversations, and even around a family dinner table, because the home is not protected in this law. So the conversations that you have with your children are not going to be protected if you say something that your children might have been taught is hateful, and that they
so
report
your children
you.
can report you. Basically, your children can say, you know, I was sitting at the dinner table, I was telling my mother that I feel like I'm a man, even though she had a little girl. I am a man. She called me a little girl. It was so hateful. It broke my heart. I have to come to the police and report my mom. Like, that's it.
Yeah,
not protected.
That can happen very easily. Yeah, exactly.
That's absolutely incredible. I wanted to ask you, you know, as far as like the law, I was kind of stunned that somebody, I don't know if it could go the reverse, because when you have Hamza Yusuf making all of those allegations against white people, it's kind of ironic that he was behind writing some of these anti-hate laws. So, I mean, is it like, I mean, could it backlash on him? Like, could every white minister be like, I was just so offended at the way he talked about my identity that...
This is actually kind of the hilarious thing. So J.K. Rowling was the second most complained about person in the first week following the law. Basically, there was about 7,000 complaints put in the first few days. And the second most popular person to complain about was J.K. Rowling. But the first most popular person to complain about was Hamza Yusuf, who authored the bill. So Scotland is actually quite hilarious. Maybe we haven't lost our sense of humor after all.
Maybe you haven't. I'm worried, though, if I went there, let me put it to you this way. This is kind of interesting. What if, just like the grandmother in Finland, right? What if somebody travels to Scotland, a famous person or somebody who, you know, is very controversial, and then they're in Scotland, maybe golfing, maybe having some tea, I don't know, visiting a friend, maybe causing trouble, I don't know, whatever they want to do. And somebody in Scotland's looking at their social media accounts and saying, this person is, in my opinion, a racist or a misogynist or whatever. Can they turn that person in, maybe?
Yeah, well, I mean, when you go to a country, you have to respect the laws that are there. And this is the really interesting thing is about social media, because it transcends boundaries in a way that I don't know if the law really knows how to cope with yet. And, you know, are we really to expect Elon Musk to censor the whole of Twitter because of what one Scottish person in a pub somewhere might find offensive? Well, the more interesting scenario actually for this is that Ireland are considering an equally oppressive hate speech law, one that would even criminalize you for the memes that you have on your phone. Even if you haven't shared them, the police could go through your phone and check what kind of information you have stored on there and see if that is hateful. Well, Ireland, Dublin, is where Elon Musk actually headquarters his international X. He has his international X headquarters in Dublin. So that's going to be a very difficult situation. And it's not only X that's headquartered there, but Facebook, Reddit, and many other social media companies have their European output there. So how that's going to affect how executives and directors for these companies are, you know, held accountable for any hate speech that the Irish authorities deem to be found, you know, even if someone posts from the States or from Finland or Jamaica or wherever else they post from. I mean, it can be seen in Ireland. It can be, you know, used as an offensive material in Ireland. Therefore, can Elon be held accountable for that? We'll have to see how that shakes out.
Or will he just have to move his entire business, he'll have to move X out of Ireland.
Very likely, isn't it? And that will be the same for many tech and social media companies which have brought business to Ireland. So I think there's going to be an economic impact here. I mean, it's not to say that there's thousands of people working in these offices. It's not the case. But there certainly is a prestige to be hosting these international headquarters. And there is a reasonable degree of employment there as well. So it would be very sad, I think. It would be a loss to the Irish people to see these companies move out simply because of restrictive speech laws put in place by their government, which is certainly not the priority that they should be focusing on right now, should it? I mean, there's very few people in Ireland who would say that that is the number one problem in their nation right now is mean tweets.
Yeah, I think the economy is definitely going to take precedence over mean tweets. That's for sure. Hey, folks, MyPillow. When Mike Lindell first launched MyPillow, it was solely a solution for one problem. But with the dedication of his team, they've expanded their offerings to include hundreds of products. Yes, and to spread the word that they will not be part of the cancel culture, they are hosting a $25 extravaganza going on now. And here's that current offer. Use promo code Carter, CARTER at mypillow.com to get the sale price and free shipping on your order over $75. Folks, you know, Macy Daisy Buttercup, she's under my desk right now. She loves the MyPillow dog bed. We've got the MyPillow slippers, the MyPillow pillows, the MyPillow sheets, everything MyPillow here at the Carter household. Other savings, remember, you use that promo code Carter, CARTER, and you can get the brand new 4-pack dish towels, luxurious 6-pack towel sets, all of it. All of you with the Giza Dream bed sheets, queen size right now for $59.98 with that promo code and 60% off my slippers. You just can't beat that. Mattress toppers as low as $99.99. Go to mypillow.com or call 1-800-685-7221 today to get in on the $25 extravaganza today. Be sure to use code Carter, CARTER, to get the sale price and free shipping on your order over $75. Call 1-800-685-7221 or go to mypillow.com. Promo code Carter, CARTER. Again, mypillow.com, promo code Carter. Do you think hate speech laws like this could end up coming to the United States? I mean, how close is this to happening here?
Yeah, well, of course, you have your free speech amendment in your constitution, which is great, and it does a lot to protect. But I think what you can see is a culture that is informed by these things creeping across Europe, a culture of saying you can't say that, and that chilling effect that it has on conversations, even at the family dinner table. It just would make people scared maybe to speak up in case of the social backlash that we see all too readily on Twitter, on different social media platforms, and just south of your border, actually. In Mexico, we have two individuals who we're supporting down there who are politicians, actually both from different political parties, so not aligned necessarily on every issue, but both of them have been prosecuted and convicted of gender-based political violence because they, in their tweets, weren't able to refer to a man as a woman. They weren't able to make that lie in their tweets that a man should be identifying as a woman. And they said, a man who self-describes as a woman to describe this individual. Both of them have been convicted of violence because of this tweet, and we're helping them seek justice at the Inter-American Commission for that. But isn't that absolutely wild that just for a tweet where you weren't able to lie about gender, that you can be convicted? And both of them are on an offenders register.
This is insane. I did read that story, and I'm so glad you brought it up and reminded me of it because it's so important. It's what we're seeing right now in so many different places. I think it's the reason why Elon Musk is fighting so hard in Brazil, and making it such a big deal but let's talk about the Mexico case, because I think this is very important. What are they facing for these charges?
Well, they've both been convicted, and they had to, as a part of their punishment, tweet multiple apologies at several points of a day, twice a day for 15 days. They had to apologize as court instructed for what they had said. To me, that sounds like a form of public humiliation. It's like putting someone in the stocks and having them recant their kind of their heresy, if you like. And of course, they were both placed in this offenders register. There is a an opportunity for election coming up, and one of these individuals is still a sitting politician. So we're going to see how that impacts him and his ability to run. But I think, to be placed on an offenders register is such a serious thing. It really gives a black mark against your name, your public record, all for a tweet. And I'm so glad that Elon Musk is taking these things seriously. I'm so glad he's taking action in Brazil. But we do have to kind of consider a global strategy for Twitter, because in country after country, they're coming after this right to be able to engage in that public square, which used to be a physical public square. And now it's pretty clear our public square is Twitter. It's the place we're able to exchange ideas, have people of different viewpoints and different communities assemble. And with Ireland and Scotland and Canada and Mexico, this is being shut down country after country. And I think I'm so grateful as well that Elon has told the Irish government that he will challenge the bill if it's passed. I think that's really awesome. I think, that's really great for him to be making that stand. And we all have to rally behind him and be pointing out to these governments that this is absolutely wrong. This is not how a 21st century Western democratic society should be acting. This is something historic. This is something that should be consigned to the darker pages of our history books. And we have to relearn that lesson and point to that so that these governments do not implement these censorial measures.
It's so medieval and so bizarre, and it's like burn the witch at the stake. They're putting people up at the stake, but for actual science, it's like Copernicus. When he came out and he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I told the truth, and the whole world's coming after me now." And it's backwards. I was actually speaking with a journalist that's going to be working on a story for me in Pakistan right now, and they're a little nervous, so they're working on the story under a pseudonym because they're afraid of speaking out. But in Pakistan in February, they outlawed X. I mean, they've outlawed it. So you can't even use it there because, the government is stringently going after. And I think people around the world should have a platform where they can freely speak and share ideas. I agree with you on this. And it has to be taken into a global strategy, just as you said. What do you think the best way to do that is? I mean, we have Elon Musk, and of course, X is his company, so he can lead the charge. But what can other attorneys, advocates do? Is there a global forum that you belong to where you're talking to other lawyers who are part of your alliance that are saying hey, we want to work with you on this? Is there any kind of strategy that you're working on?
Yeah, well, ADF International has an alliance of over 4,000 lawyers across the world. So that's a really exciting place to start. And we're always interested in connecting with more, of course. And I think it's really essential to be on top of the stories and the cases that are happening in your region and to be amplifying these voices. Because as you'll know, Sarah, as someone who has a show, a story can really capture the nation's attention and illustrate a problem that you can't do just by theory or facts. But if you have someone like Rodrigo or Quadri sitting down in Mexico, who now have a criminal, who are on a criminal list and have been convicted of violence, these two long-standing, long-serving politicians who are just doing their best to serve their constituencies and their electorate and to make Mexico a better place for everyone. And they're sitting now with convictions of violence for tweeting the truth about gender. That is such a clear, understandable illustration of what we're up against here. And I think it's really good to be amplifying these stories across Twitter and across the news and following them and advocating for them loudly to our own governments as they consider implementing hate speech laws. You can look at Scotland, look at Finland, look to these stories and give these examples and say, not here. Here we need free speech. Here we need to protect everybody's right to engage in conversation. In my country, we cannot have censorship. And I think that will be a very helpful, effective way to stand up against censorship instead of a kind of discoordinated where we're not ready to face the music until it's too late, until the bill is gone through Parliament and suddenly we panic. We have to have this information in our back pockets ahead of time to be able to explain to the people who are voting on this legislation, who have MPs, have parliamentarians to write to tell them to say no to censorship.
I absolutely agree with you. And I think it's important for everyone listening here. I mean, Scotland, this is a maximum sentence of 7 years in prison. That's incredible to me. I mean, that someone could even be charged and then sentenced up to 7 years. I mean, just the threat of that is chilling enough. But remember, in the United States, and this is for everyone listening here, to Lois and I, in the US during COVID, we saw very similar actions take place. We saw it across the globe, but we saw where people were reporting family members. We saw that in Canada, where people were turning in family that showed up to have dinner, and and it was a different situation, but it's similar in the sense where we are like losing our ability to be free, to be able to make decisions for ourselves. And these governments are taking that away from us. But you're right. We need to amplify those stories that are out there. We need to amplify the people that are already paying the price for this. And we need to do it through our social media and through our stories and through people like you, Lois. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. I'm going to leave the last little bit for you. Tell us what we can do to help you. Tell us what we can do to help amplify these stories and support your organization.
Oh, thank you, Sarah. Well, if you log on to adfinternational.org, you can see all of our cases from across the globe where we are challenging these hate speech laws and standing up for those who are impacted by them, who have been speaking out about their beliefs and have been unjustly censored. So check out Päivi's story in Finland, check out Rodrigo's story in Mexico, and just amplify and share these stories so that when it comes to your country, you and your friends will be ready too. I appreciate that a lot.
I want to say thank you again to Lois McLatchie for being on the Sara Carter Show. Thank you so much for joining me today and warning us of what can happen in our own country. Look, I do not want to be forced into submission to a government or anyone that is making me lie, that is making me fundamentally ignore the truth, all because they have decided to worship this new god of wokeness. I will not be a part of that. I hope you will not be a part of that. Please make sure you are subscribed to the Sara Carter Show on your favorite podcast app. It really gives us a boost in our algorithm. Go to YouTube, follow us on YouTube and on Rumble. Please give us a like and a follow there as well. Thank you so much for being a part of the show. Here is where we discuss the most important issues of the day, right? It's right here. You and I together, we're the only ones that can make a difference. You are the only one that can make a difference and save this great nation and save our world for future generations. Follow me on Truth at Sara Carter Official, on X at Sara Carter DC, and on Instagram at @SCarterDC. God bless you. God bless our nation. And God bless the great state of Texas.